Welcome to the 2024-25 Allison R. Bernstein Media Mentoring Program Opening Event, Roadmaps for Refusal of AI in Content Production Work. I am so excited to introduce our speaker for tonight, Professor Britt S. Britt S. is an assistant professor of library science at the Rutgers School of Communication and Information. She is a critical informatics scholar studying the political economy of information infrastructure as it relates to evidentiary standards and political action. Previously, she has published work on internet infrastructure projects, AI-generated information objects, digital labor, and civic data, analyzed through the lenses of political economy, cultural studies, and feminist social epistemology. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Britt so we can get started.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Nishi. And I just want to start by saying I'm incredibly honored to be here with you all in the media mentoring program with the IWL. I'm going to be talking with you today about some observations, some thoughts, some loose theorizations I've had while researching data and information infrastructures, as well as artificial intelligence, audiovisual, and text content generation. And I've been doing this now, I was just thinking about it today. I've been doing this for nearly a decade now, which surprised me somehow. It's funny how time works. But today I'm going to be focusing in a lot on AI-generated content practices, etc., as they intervene in different spheres that we can think about as they relate to various media practices, from content production to labor issues, and how we can think about, some of the keywords that you mentioned in your introductions in the chat, of AI being scary, or, simply a tool, or I think the word that I would use, with some caveats, obviously, would be overhyped. And we'll talk a little bit more and sort of suss those out, hopefully, in the conversation that we have here today. So I'm going to start sharing my slides. Hopefully. Okay. And then, of course, I have to reorganize my whole desktop. This is the song and dance that we have to do, and you would think I would be more comfortable with it by now, but it's always like, what am I doing? Okay. All right. So since it appeared in 2017, wide swaths of AI-generated or altered video, or what people commonly refer to as deepfakes, have featured women in various portrayals, we'll say, to the point that in 2019, Deep Trace Labs did a broad sweeping search and found that 96% of all deepfake content that was then, only 2 years old, featured women in pornographic videos. We know from the work of Jesse Daniels, of Safiya Noble, of legal theorists like Danielle Citron and Marianne Franks, as well as those studying misinformation. Manipulated images and videos are already, before the advent of deepfakes, were already wielded by amateur communities online to target women, LGBTQIA individuals, people of color, and those questioning powerful systems. And with the advent of deepfakes, that has really taken off, especially in contemporary discourse. Though I would say that the older mechanisms that I call cheap fakes in a landmark report that I produced in 2019 that require no AI interventions at all are still far more common, far more harmful to people, and are still much more difficult to address through content moderation or automatic detection. So, at present, the most common technique of AI-generated audiovisual manipulation uses free apps like Fake App. They are a lot of these videos and images are disseminated through online encrypted platforms that are impossible to, look at from the outside, platforms like Telegram and Signal. Um, at the beginning, these deepfake communities made videos of public figures like Scarlett Johansson and Gal Gadot, and then later, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Pelosi. But now people are using these techniques to make videos increasingly of private individuals. There was a well-known piece in the New York Times last spring about, how these videos had targeted, a young woman who was just starting out her career, and it, really threatened her and made her feel, concerned about her future job prospects because she had been, targeted by these deepfake videos. But these videos of private individuals, of classmates, of ex-girlfriends, and again, they are predominantly videos of women in pornographic, situations or with pornographic videos. And these can be made with just a few images scraped from social media profiles. So, it's true that the scale of social media and online platforms, as well as AI generated content, has amplified the volume and velocity of the sort of visual falsehoods and harmful audiovisual productions that users of all types must contend with. It's not really that we have, not only that we have new means of generating copies with no originals, or, sort of producing these fake videos that have no basis in reality. It's that we have countless new channels for creating and distributing them. And once they're out there, they're nearly impossible to remove. And more to the point, I think for the audience in here, this AI generated, user generated audiovisual content is often a medium for spreading dominant political ideologies like white supremacy and misogyny, as we see from the examples that have proliferated, and undermining solidarity with marginalized groups. And this all happens, interferes in political processes without featuring political figures or geopolitical strife, though there is a subset of deepfakes that do that as well. And I have an image here of deepfake regulation that has really skyrocketed since 2022. And you'll think back to 2022, and what happened in 2022 was that that's when GPT released new models that were incredibly more powerful, and people began using, there was an incredible uptick in using Midjourney and all sorts of different, user amateur-based sort of user-generated AI content, as well as, this is not to mention all of the audio, AI-generated audio content that proliferated with 11 labs in 2022. So since then, there's been an uptick in legislation around deepfakes, both as they intervene in political or electoral processes, as well as with what you see here with image-based abuse and non-consensual pornography. So, even though the history of these deepfakes, is very short, we do see some progress moving toward, reining some of this in, even if it is imperfect and in the realm of, legislation. So the second area I want to talk about is AI in the workplace. And I think, especially as media professionals increasingly engage with data-driven systems, and quantification. I think that this is an important sort of topic to mention here. And this is also something that I have been working on at present, which is the intervention of AI and data-driven practices into labor, and how to think about that, and how to, deal with that, how to negotiate with that. So surveillance of workers and workplaces has really ramped up since the start of the pandemic. There are a number of studies attesting to this, spurred by the shift to remote work, an increased blurring of work and home, and the integration of workplace technology, into personal devices and spaces. And while this is occurring across industries and levels of management, low-wage workers, especially low-wage workers who are women of color, have been at the forefront of the fight to end workplace surveillance, because it disproportionately impacts these people, these categories of workers. And these people have been at the forefront of the fight to end workplace surveillance and algorithmically enabled harms. So worker-led organizing has brought attention to how algorithmic management is being used for such things as, setting workers' benchmarks in pay, for setting productivity quotas and making recommendations about who to hire, who to promote, who to demote, who to fire, and on what grounds. And companies give many disparate reasons for why they deploy these, data-driven technologies within the workplace, making, I would say, thinly veiled or weakly supported claims that they curb discrimination, or that they offer useful metrics for management to demonstrate compliance, or that they, increase the efficiency of certain labor-intensive processes like reading through applicant resumes or, even producing content. So, you see how a lot of these technologies have sort of, reached their hands into all sorts of things that we always thought were safe from, the encroachment of technology. This, knowledge production work, information work, journalistic practices, content production, etc. As someone who started out in video editing, I always thought that that would be a safe job. But I've had friends in video editing and graphic design saying, hey, listen, I'm really worried about my job because, somebody can just go into Midjourney, especially with graphic design stuff, and whip up what I could, in a number of minutes, it would take me hours to do, right? But many have argued that the deleterious effects of these algorithmic technologies, data-driven technologies, far outweigh the justifications that are given. Algorithmic management ratchets up the devaluation of work. It unequally distributes risks and privileges. It threatens protected worker-led collective action and leads to the destruction of worker privacy. And what, recent worker-driven efforts underscore is that injecting data-driven technologies like AI is sort of an example of this into the workplace, as well as, workplace surveillance that has little to do with productivity, efficiency, or safety. Fundamentally, these systems are designed for worker control. And then on to my third area that I have been working on, again now for 15 or not 15, for 10 years, is surveillance and incarceration and the use of surveillance technologies to disproportionately target and harm minoritized communities. So again, in 2020, as the pandemic raged and there was outrage around the killing of George Floyd, and police continued to kill people. A summer of civil unrest pushed a national conversation around police reform and resulted in some policy shifts or some sort of epistemic shifts around policing technologies and surveillance around the country. So in a lot of my work, I dig into these epistemologies of evidence as, these data-driven technologies are used to, provide evidence and justify the, over-policing and incarceration of minoritized communities. And I discuss how statistical analyses that push for things like accountability, privacy, transparency, etc., may be a fine first step, but in a lot of cases, they justify and legitimize anti-labor sentiment, surveillance, carceral institutions, and serve as little more than a pressure valve, and weakening calls for more meaningful social and institutional change around technology, social relations, work, policing, and really what it means to live in a society with people with these technological systems that seem to have no guardrails or very little that we can do to rein them in. And so that's sort of where I'm coming from, and the three big buckets that I wanted to talk to you all about or sort of provide provocations into. Um, so I'll move forward here. Um, So these are some texts that I draw from. These are, variously from feminist social epistemology, Black feminist social epistemology, as well as critical race theory, feminist theory, that criticize the deployment of these captivating technologies, as Ruha Benjamin talks about in her text that I have there in the middle, that disproportionately harm already, over surveilled communities, whether they be at work, whether they be, women and girls who are disproportionately targeted and surveilled and sort of pornified, as Sophia Noble's groundbreaking work way back in 2014 pointed out, as well as, minoritized communities that are on the receiving end of a lot of systemic inequality and surveillance through policing technologies. And so, I think about these questions of epistemic burden and, how these different communities are forced to provide data on their own minoritization, and told that their own stories of being targeted or harmed don't work, and that we need more technology in the workplace or in communities to prove that people are being disproportionately harmed. And then, in the end, people who are oppressed are often, in the end, discredited, blamed for their own misfortunes, ignored. And this is just to name a few ways that epistemic burdens exert their influence. Another way is by saying, in contemporary discourse that, AI is here and you have to adapt to it, and, it's just up to you to learn how to do it. And if you can't learn how to use this technology, then you're going to be, sort of on the receiving end of being on the chopping block, so to speak. So I think I went through a lot of these are a few of the works that I just mentioned with the policing technology work that I've done in the past, and the sort of critical takes on policing technology and epistemic burden I've done in the past. But I do want to raise that there are glimmers of hope, like I mentioned with, as I mentioned with the policy changes that are occurring around deepfakes that intervene in political processes and non-consensual pornography. As I mentioned with the worker organizing within, smaller scale workplaces to push back against the encroachment of data-driven technology in the workplace. We have to ask ourselves, when technocratic solutions like, data-driven technologies in these three scenarios that I just talked about are and are not useful, and when they might be harmful, and in the case that they are harmful or not useful, how we might push back against them. I feel like at present with AI-generated technologies, from deepfakes to, ChatGPT, the overall, the discourse sort of pushes us to think that there's nothing that we can do, that this is a foregone conclusion. And these discussions require us to attend meaningfully to whose knowledge, needs, and power are currently privileged, and how we can create appropriate spaces to adopt counter practices and self-determination. From to this end, I draw a lot from carceral abolition and carceral abolition advocates that understand policing not only as a broken institution, or understand policing not as simply a broken institution that can be reformed with more community oversight, with the, inclusion of more technology or police force implicit bias trainings. But that policing in and of itself is ineffective in protecting the public from harm, as it is and has always been predicated on violently maintaining the oppressive order of gendered racial capitalism. And as such, police abolitionists, while they may vary in their practices and perspectives, they generally advocate that these types of carceral systems need to be defunded, dismantled, and then replaced by completely different systems that promote community wellness, among other things, and take systemic oppression into account. So, that's sort of one end of the spectrum, this notion of abolition and tech abolition, people within, feminist and Black feminist circles are interested in this question of tech abolition and what we might build afterwards. And I'm also, interested in that question. But I'm also interested in this notion of organizing and this notion that, while we may have to wait a while on, the types of meaningful change that we want within our system, there are things that we can do now, and there are ways that we can mobilize against harmful AI practices. So, let me just see here and catch up with my slides. Where are we? Sorry. So some things that I've been working on recently are this notion of organizing against harmful AI as it has been, through the various infrastructures. So, I think we all can remember the SAG-AFTRA strike that resulted in some enormous contract wins, keeping digital clones and protecting the digital likenesses of actors and the outputs and intellectual property of writers within the entertainment industry. There's an image here from the Google walkout in 2019 where a bunch of women at Google, recognized and then organized around the fact that, women at Google were treated inappropriately, unfairly, and were not being promoted at the same level that men were, and that there were, huge glaring issues with gender equity inside the organization. And then we see, a number of different organizing instances around, harmful practices like no tech for ICE or the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, in which a organization called Tech Won't Build It of workers within Silicon Valley, within the tech industry, and specifically within Amazon, who worked as a client to Palantir, were able to shut down Amazon's participation with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement organization under the auspices of, not providing their intellectual resources and capacities for things that they did not, did not align with their values. So specifically, I'll, just sort of highlight one case here that I've been looking a lot at recently. I'm doing a huge project now around AI and labor, and how labor has been working to better understand AI and how it intervenes in various industries and set, different best practices, guidelines for, sort of forcing guardrails back on these technologies that have been, sort of uncritically introduced into the workplace in a number of scenarios, across many industries. So this is what I see as coming from SAG-AFTRA, and the protections that they provide are for, people to be, for people to consent and be compensated for use of both their likeness and of their intellectual property within the data systems and databases that contribute to AI that is used within the entertainment industry. For for an example here, background actors have gain landmark protections and the ability to force consent or to ask for consent for their, for their likeness to be included in these data sets and then used, right? And if they are used, then, to be compensated for these things. And a lot of the people within labor are really excited about this because it, sets a precedent for other things that for similar things that other industries might ask for, and also sort of sets the bar at a certain place that we can start asking for more. But even within these contracts, of which I've looked through them extensively, there's still this rhetoric that AI is a foregone conclusion, and we simply need to, negotiate with it, to work within its frameworks, to accept that it exists, and try to, make nice with these technologies. But I think that there is capacity for pushing back a little more forcefully, to say, there are a lot of cases where these data-driven technologies should not exist, especially in our workplaces. And if we're able to push back in a sort of negotiated way, it provides some sort of footholds for us to push forward more decisively. So that's where I'm at with that. These are a few other examples of negotiation and refusal that are sort of grassroots within information and computational schools that are training students to become not only better developers and stewards of technology, but that then once they are in these large companies, so they can, have better language to push back against, technologies that are not used and not deployed or developed in accordance um, to their value system. And this feminist data manifest no is a mode of refusal and reconfiguration. It's a sort of manifesto that students within iSchools sign on to and learn about, in order to think about, how to refuse or how to negotiate with these systems, whenever, these students' labor power is being used to build and justify these harmful technological systems. And this was developed by a bunch of colleagues of mine, from all over the United States, including Marika C4 and Pat Garcia. I always have to shout them out because it's really good work. And so, this is an example from Critical Resistance, which is a prison abolition framework that I and others have been working toward or working with to think through tech abolition and how we also might encourage media professionals, technology developers, information professionals in the future to do some work from, within the inside to push back against some of these harmful uses of AI. So with that, I think I'm done talking for my part. I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to also thank my research partners in all of this, which you see here. So that being said, I haven't responded to, everybody's concerns that they mentioned in the chat with their, one word sort of thoughts or impressions of AI-driven technology, but I hope that we can talk more about it, because there are a lot of interesting nuances to this debate that can't be neatly talked about in 20 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Britt, for that insightful and detailed discussion. If anyone in the audience has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask.
So here's a question that I have for you all, if that's okay. Have you been, so I know that all of you are engaged in the media in some way and are in many cases media professionals. And so I'm interested to know from you how you've come up against data-driven technologies or AI in your own work.
I can go. So, hi everyone, Rachel Bernstein. Thank you, Britt, for that presentation. Super insightful. I work in tech. I work on the analyst relations team at Splunk, which is a data company. We provide security software and like back-end user software for customers to monitor their environments. We just got acquired by an even bigger company, Cisco. So now I've been going from like an 8,000 person company to a 90,000 plus person company. And my day is all consumed by AI, Gen AI. What are we doing in the Gen AI race? I don't, this isn't much like of a question, but it's more of like answering your question of, it comes up all the time. Our our company is very much like we can't use like third party like Gen AI tools like for our jobs. Like that's something that's been implemented. We have to do a training. Any proprietary like NDA information like we can't put into like Chat GPT or just like any tool because it can have like huge like data repercussions for our company and our employees. So they do a really good job with like training on like the um, on just making sure that we're being responsible with our use of AI, which is good. I personally don't use it in my everyday. I know a lot of people who will do it to like make their job easier with like putting in like a deck proposal or like emails or scheduling. But I have some people on my team who use it to actually help like with like spreadsheets and how to like make like rules a lot easier for them. So I know there's people who are like using it and they're being really productive with it. I've kind of buried my head in the sand a bit with wanting to actually use it for my everyday. We're like within our company are always like trying to develop like new AI and Gen AI chat bot abilities for like our customers and things like that. So it's like part of my everyday, but I also don't feel overwhelmed by it. I think the bigger issues are what you're talking about with how it's being used to um, harm women and underrepresented communities and things like that. So I think those are the conversations that aren't being had enough. And I just appreciate like your insights in the work that you're doing because it's a conversation that isn't in my everyday, although AI is in my everyday. So this was just really, um, it was nice to kind of take a step back and again, like realize like, oh, like this is something that is playing a huge role in our society right now. And like I said in the chat earlier, like it's something that we can use for good and, you know, make our lives easier and things like that. But in the hands of the wrong people, just like anything, bad actors get to it and it creates chaos and complications and harmful situations for people. So yeah, that was just my brain dump there. But thank you again for speaking to us. This was great.
Thanks, Rachel. Laura has her hand raised.
Hi. Unfortunately, I missed most of the presentation because I like just got home from work. I heard the last couple moments and the question, and I work in like content creation, and um, and also in a situation that's very understaffed and continues to be understaffed, and a lot of my colleagues across other departments and in other companies are in a lot of the same situation. And I think part of the issue that's happening is um, the assumption that like AI can just do everything, right? Um, we don't actually need skilled employees to do these tasks, right? You can just get AI to do it. You know, and right, to a large extent, like no, you can't. Um, but that doesn't stop administrators from like cutting your budget and cutting your staff and refusing to fill positions. And similarly, I think last year, I was at a one-day conference, and I think a couple other people on this call were there, and Um, well, I think someone had asked a question of a panelist who was talking about AI about, how do we use AI to deal with overwork? And it was just sort of the topic was, just became, well, AI can just do more of your work for you, and then you can do more work. Right? Which doesn't address the issue of overwork, and it doesn't give you more time to spend on those like higher cognitive level things. It's just like, oh, well, AI will just make you more productive and we can get more labor out of you. So it was a alarmingly, sort of just blanketly capitalist like approach to AI. There was no questioning of it. And it was just sort of like, oh, tell me your tools that will allow me to provide more labor. So those are, I have been dabbling in AI a little bit to see how it does, free up my time a little bit and does make things easier. But the sort of lack of critical thinking around the implementation of it and the human side of it has been really surprising to me in a lot of ways. So there's my random thoughts to answer your question.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And like, the uncritical adoption of these technologies, into the workplace, especially, sort of highlights the fact that it's like trying to put a band-aid on a bigger problem, right? Like, here's a technical solution for a problem that is not technical, right? Overwork and, labor devaluation, all of that. It's not really a problem that technology can solve. It's a larger, social and political problem um, about, the ways that capitalist society works and extracts value from workers, right? So I hear your point. Um, I wish I had a solution for you, but unfortunately, these types of solutions are hard. Daphna, hello.
Hi, Britt. Thank you so much. So here's another issue that you not going to have a solution for, of course. So from the perspective of faculty and administration at the university and other workforce, we of course are constantly concerned about issues of academic integrity with students. Just recently, we had long discussions about the use of AI in writing statements for admission. All the way from undergraduate admission to PhD students admission, to the point that we said, oh, we have to think of a different way to screen candidates because they're all, writing pulling down their statements from ChatGPT or something else. So, but the bigger question, so those are all questions that everybody is facing now and everybody's concerned. It's not original for us. But I think the real question that we're starting to tackle and try to understand is the impact that AI has on what knowledge is. What does it mean to learn? What does it mean to know? And what kind of long-term impact that might have on higher education in general, but in our area, higher education. So since most of the group here are students, those are big questions about the education you're getting and education that next generations will be getting. And what does it, and to me, the question is, what does it mean to know
Yeah.
something?
Yeah.
So,
And like, I'll point to my colleagues in learning sciences who have been researching on data-driven technologies for many, many years. And we see that, knowledge, sort of knowledge retention, and the types of things that we, like to foster within, academia for our students so that they can go on and live productive, healthy lives. These types of technologies are not very good at, at fostering retention. At best, they're good at teaching students to regurgitate something for a test. There was just a really great piece in, I believe it was The Atlantic, about this as well. So yeah, again, I don't have any great answers, but I keep coming back to this issue of, these companies that have built out these generative AI models and are proselytizing these as, the answers for many social ills. they don't care about, the future of knowledge acquisition. And sometimes, in a few specific cases, I worry about, the idea that a lot of these technology companies and the people behind them are actually, very interested in devaluing public education, devaluing public information literacy, and some of them have even said as much, right? So it's a huge problem, and again, one that I don't
Yeah,
really
of course.
have an answer to.
So
But
let me do a little commercial break here, if you allow me. So Bree, together with two other colleagues in our school from two other departments, no, actually one from the same department, from another department, created a critical information and media literacy course that is called Disinformation Detox. There's a subtitle, but you will remember the Disinformation Detox. Which is basically, as well, Britt can talk about it. It's basically trying to teach students to think critically about their media consumption, to understand what's behind media and information that we're all exposed to, including some aspects of AI, but of course other aspects. We started a pilot of the course in our school, but it was accepted as a general education course for the entire university. And this is one of the things that we believe our school is able to contribute to the entire education of, informed citizens. So thank you, Britt, for that as well. Just an opportunity to do a little promotion for this course.
yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for the plug. Yeah. Thanks, Daphne. Elizabeth.
Hi, Britt. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. This has been so interesting. So I actually work at Drexel University's Career Center, and a main focus of Drexel overall as a university has been developing or pushing students to develop AI as a skill set. Drexel is a big cooperative education university, and for me, that push of, getting these students to build out this specific skill set feels really challenging or kind of gross to me, because simultaneously Drexel has been implementing a ton of different adult learner programs to support Philadelphians in, transcending socioeconomic boundaries. So I was really curious your thoughts of, pushing AI as a skill set for these white collar jobs or white collar professions. And, should this be something that our students really learn, or, should this be something that particularly maybe for career service professionals, like pushing back against that?
Yeah, I mean, without knowing the nuances in the politics, at Drexel University, I'll say a few things about that. You really have to think about what the purpose of, higher education is, sort of like I was just saying with, AI tools and, knowledge production, retention, and, application so that, we can go on and continue to live our lives in a way that is, meaningful and where we can, have a sense of flourishing, right? And there is again this notion of you have to adapt to it and you have to adopt it, or otherwise, you're gonna get left behind and that's gonna be all your fault. That being said, like, it would require coordinated action and organizing across higher education to, push back against this notion, right? And that's a lot of why I talked about that feminist data manifest no, and tech worker organizing, because it's already happening for, to some degree where, individual educational departments are like, we're not trying to teach or sort of instruct a bunch of future professionals in the world that are just interoperable, that uncritically engage with these technologies as a means of putting, food on the table. Like, we want people to strive for more, and we want to provide them with the conceptual and even, sometimes practical tools for doing so. That being said, I wish I had more answers for you all. I would make the argument to, your, your management that this isn't a good or healthy way to move forward. And again, it depends on, what kind of AI adoption and what kind of AI professionalization we're talking about here. In information science, there's been a lot of discussion around now I'm forgetting prompt trainers teaching people to, just essentially become better at producing prompts for AI so that they can be, a sort of middle person in the infrastructural process, right, of like teaching these data to do specific things. And again, training themselves out of a job like we've seen so many times over and over in the history of digital labor, even in the last 20 years or something like that. So yeah, let's talk about it more. I'm happy to talk to you more about this. I, can't say prescriptively like do this, do this, do this, 1, 2, 3, and you're gonna be all set. But I think it is necessarily a longer ongoing conversation that we across schools need to be having.
Thank you.
A hand raise from Lisa.
Thank you for this conversation and bringing to light, for me, some questions about the change in the work I do, which is raising money for the university. And it seems that over the years, there's been such a movement toward metrics. Now we have so much data, we can measure everything, and things get translated driven by data. And so you have to record every contact and so on and so forth. So my question is, what exactly is there a line between data science and AI? And how does that suddenly now we're all talking about AI, but data science has been around for a long, long time. And we have so much data on people. I mean, we have 600,000 alumni and they're in a database and we like to learn about them and so on and so forth. So in one way, it's helpful, but in another way, it takes away something personal. So I wonder if you could
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So you've said a bunch of interesting stuff here, and I've got a few things to say about it. So this notion of like, why AI? Why now? Like, why are we all of a sudden talking about AI? And like, the word that I used at the very beginning of my talk to as a response to the prompt was overhyped. AI is yet again another buzzword for, these data infrastructures that have been growing and sort of being aggregated and, cross-checked with one another and used in all of these ways to make predictions and recommendations about what you should do based on the patterns in the data. But it's all data science, right? These are data infrastructures that have been built up and that are, continue to draw from, data sources. There's a sort of application and maneuvering of the types of data, some, different equations that get applied to the data to make these predictions. And that's all AI really is at the center of things. But, with generative AI, there's this notion where there can be some applications where some stuff is generated sort of in a novel way, with generative adversarial networks, like, these prediction algorithms start to train each other. Without getting too deeply into the weeds of like, what AI is and what, and how it's different from other types of, data infrastructural practices, which I could talk about all day. There's not a lot of difference. And whenever you start talking to people about AI, they'll quickly, it sort of quickly susses out that like, what are we talking about when we talk about AI? Are we talking about these companies? Are we talking about generative AI? Are we talking about data sets that we draw from? Are we talking about like the statistical maneuvers for prediction and recommendation? And in the end, they're all part of this larger data infrastructure that is, again, has been growing since the year, really since the advent of the internet, but especially since Web 2.0 and platforms. Anyway, so your next question is, or something that resonated with me in your question was about, we have this large database of people and, it's sort of when all of these, algorithms are applied to this data and, it sort of manufactures how we interact with people, right? By using these predictive technologies or recommendations or whatever. And what's lost there? And, I think this question applies in a lot of scenarios, right? Like we can think about this in terms of social media, like, we may have 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever friends on social media, but like, what is our actual interaction and like, what does that actually get us, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I do think probably, and I think you're probably the best person to say or talk about it, but I would definitely say that like we're losing some personal interaction as we, sort of focus on the larger, accretion of data, as opposed to developing real and genuine relationships. And, people say that all the time, like the strength of weak ties like are good in some scenarios, but they only get you so far. Again, you can only rely on those weak ties so much for, the real meaningful interactions of life, right? And like, I'm talking here like sort of in a social media sense, but I think you can sort of extend that to other scenarios, maybe in the one that you're working in, I'm not sure. But Rebecca?
Hi, thank you so much for everything that you've said. It's a fascinating presentation, and the work you're doing is, I know, very complex. I am interested in the labor aspect of it. And just thinking of what Lisa was saying in the human, what is lost, I've been thinking a lot about time. And I'm thinking about how fast AI is moving and how few people are determining how fast it's moving. And we are limited human beings. We are little limited human beings, and we only have so much time when we should be working in a day. And I'm watching our students and our faculty and the people I work with just because we're able, just taking Zoom, we're not even talking AI, because we're able to have 5 meetings back to back. We are having those 5 meetings back to back. So we know that already the capacity of computers and internet and et cetera, and data collection has sped up. But with AI, I see it speeding up to a point where we actually cannot manage the amount of information. So we turn to AI. It's like, we can't do it. I'm not a cog in a wheel that's going to be able to do it. So I'm just interested when you think about speed and time and humanity and the beautifulness of our humanness. What do you think about in terms of it?
Thank you so much for that question, Rebecca. That was actually the topic of my dissertation. So, I mean, it wasn't about AI, but it was about, our how technology sort of constrains and produces our sense of time, especially as it deals with labor, but then that also sort of prefigures the rest of our life, right? Like, you start to see the rest of your life in terms of your productive labor. It's a classic culture industry argument, right? And, I don't think that it's a coincidence necessarily that, the glut of information and misinformation, and, again, the sort of amassment of huge amounts of information and the speeds by which not only information is disseminated, but the speeds at which technology advances, and the speed with which technology is deployed. has our head spinning. And I think that it's not a coincidence that AI is sort of prepped and ready for this moment. Like the companies and individuals who, have been at the forefront of AI, have been in the background, like very carefully and methodically, making decisions about, data and how it's organized and how it's used, who it's sold to, etc. And, I can't say, like everybody in charge of AI is out to get us, right? Like, I'm not trying to sound conspiratorial here, but, if you look at the political economy of these things, as I'm sort of want to do, you see a very neat loop, right? That's been created where, we have these data-driven technologies that in the early 2000s were supposed to provide utopia or, even going back to the 1970s with Derek Bell, like we're supposed to provide us a utopia, provide us the ability to work less. And we see the same argument happening over and over again. Meanwhile, it sort of leaves room for our social services to be defunded, for us to feel increasingly more precarious as these technologies are incorporated into public goods like education or your workplace or even your relationships with, all of the different appified ways that, we find, who our friends are and who we love, right? Like it's a, I could sit here and talk all day about this.
Thank you
But like
so
this sense of speed is something that like is at once, social, it is at the same time technical, like speed and efficiency is sort of in technical practice, like focused on as a mode of, sort of divorcing us from everything else, right? So we need things to become more efficient so that we lose all of these important contexts, lose all of these other important things that, are sort of central to humanity, right? So there's a great book on this called Press for Time by Judy Weissman.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'll look it up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question, or are we out of time?
No, I think we have time for one more question.
Oh, well, that conversation just was making me think about labor, and I'm in a union, and our contract is going to be in negotiations next year. So I was just curious, if you had any thoughts for things that labor unions should be thinking about in the next couple of years in terms of labor rights and areas of potential exploitation.
Yes, I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And, depending on what the nuances are of your workplace, I'm also in our union, and have been thinking about this, not so much at our university, but, sort of across academia more broadly. And I would be happy to talk to you in a more concentrated way, just because you have nuances of your own workplace that, might be helpful. But drawing from SAG-AFTRA, like thinking about intellectual property, and thinking about time management and things like that, can be very useful in terms of asking for consent for these things in your contract, for transparency about the use of these technologies, for meaningful shared governance over the deployment of these technologies in your workplace, I think would be a wonderful, contract ask. So let's talk.
Thank you again, Britt, for helping us kick off our mentoring year with such an engaging discussion. And thank you to the audience for all of your questions and comments that you brought to tonight's event.